Thank you all for being here at our kickoff session for the 67th annual meeting MEC Power Play. My name is Christy Kilroy. I work in policy and research at MEC, and I'm glad to be able to introduce our first panel this morning. Our session is entitled Putting Your Community in the Place of Greatest Opportunity.
5 years ago when I came to this was my first MEC to come, and I'd been on the job for 2 months and didn't know what I was doing. So I learned a lot, and I really learned a lot that first time I came because they had Jack Welch speak on Boomtown. And if you hadn't ever had a chance to read this book, it's a pretty good idea of what small communities and even mid-sized communities have had success doing. So that was great inspiration for me. And I took some of his points and kind of some of my points, I've kind of narrowed it down to, to 4 things. That you really have to build relationships with your local people and your state people, but more than that, you really got to build the trust. And I can tell you in the beginning, we didn't really have much trust thought of us in Washington County, particularly with the state folks. You got to look for and develop whatever your assets might be. It doesn't have to be an economic development asset, maybe a tourism asset. Again, you just kind of really got to look for and develop those. You got to leverage what resources you have, and I'll give you a couple ideas on that. And you got to celebrate your small victories, meaning the victories that you personally have as well as the victories that your community has. And I need to have a confession I've told y'all. Y'all figured out from my bio that I didn't really know what I was getting into, and that's kind of what Frank Howell at Delta Council, first time he met with me, he said, you really didn't know what you got yourself into, and I don't think you have any idea what the work you got ahead of you, and he was right. But I want to show you there are a couple good things that are happening, actually several good things happening in Washington County. We have had several good announcements over the last year. We've got a $1.2 million investment coming with the Cabot Lodge downtown. We're remodeling an old hotel. The second slide, we're remodeling the Sears building. There's one local individual that's putting $9.1 million into making this into a boutique hotel. A brewery, retail, and apartments. So we're looking forward to that. The construction's already begun on that. The next slide down, the federal courthouse, we've got a $45.3 million new courthouse that will be built in Greenville in Washington County. That should be within the next 3 years. They're in the process of selecting a site, so we're excited what that's going to do to help our downtown. And the final business announcement, Mars last year announced a $31 million investment to build an R&D center, the World R&D Center in Greenville, Mississippi for all their food products. So small expansion of jobs, but we're really excited for what our local industries have done. And in addition to that, we've got another group, the Delta Housing Authority, Greenville Housing Authority, that's starting a new subdivision, $4.1 million investment in that, so we've got the first new housing development in Greenville in the last probably 20 years or so. But I want to kind of give you where we were to help those of you that may have been kind of as lost as I was 5 years ago when I started. The only building I had to market is the one that says no bathroom because it had no bathroom. And our industrial park was 200 acres, a little bit chopped up, and the first time we tried to figure a project on it, I found out that we didn't have electricity to the site, and it was going to cost a little over $1 million to put electricity. So I backed up and said, we got to do something different. And during this period, when we took this role, we'd gone through 2 not so satisfactory economic development officials. And my group, and really it was 3 or 4 of us, Dave Clark was my chairman, Johnny McCright, who I don't think made it here today. And really the 3 of us kind of huddled together and said, we've got to develop, better relationships, and we've got to figure out what we got and develop our assets. And at the time when we started, we had a $35,000 budget deficit in our group. And the newspaper wanted to destroy us, which the happiest day in my life in the beginning was when the newspaper publisher left town. So like I say, one of those small victories that you relish. And I also found out after my first month there that all of my employees had been told by the previous guy they were going to get fired. And that's pretty earth-shaking when you have one of them ask you, are we really going to get fired? So we had a lot of work to do to build relationships, and again, we still are working to build relationships. I'll tell you one funny story, and I don't think the person I would like to kind of pick on here is here, but my first day on the job, Jim Barksdale was interim MDA director, and they came to meet with our mayor, and we had the supervisors there. We had folks from the next town over. We had MDA officials there, and literally it's my first day on the job, and this MDA official on the other end of the table says, well, I hope this new guy you've hired is better than the last two clowns you've hired. And I thought to myself, who in the hell is this Mickey Milligan guy? So Mickey's a good friend of mine, and I'm sorry he's not here to hit me pick on him. But anyway, well, those were kind of the stories of what we had to deal with. So we started off really working with the MDA because you really got to have a relationship with them and get them to work with you. And the thing I did find is so many groups really wanted to help us. They just need to understand us and trust us. And the first thing that kind of on our agenda was we were having an annual meeting. In the previous year, they had lost $7,000, and I knew we couldn't afford to lose that. So we restructured our annual meeting and made $11,000. So we had an $18,000 turnaround from one year to the next. We worked on embracing our chamber division because it had really been totally ignored. And we added networking events like a golf tournament and a 5K run on July 4th, using those also to raise money to help defray our deficit. And then we began work on workforce, which I'll get into a good bit later. So in the process with other individuals and all of us working, we developed two sites, and I've kind of gotten off my slides here, but we developed two sites, Greenpoint and 61 and 82. So I went from 200 acres of land that I didn't have power located there to 1,200 acres plus. Both these sites have all the utilities either on site, underground, waiting to go. So we were fortunate to find these two areas that we were able to get under option, and we were able to convince our board to take a CD and borrow against that CD to the tune of about $40,000 to do all the site development costs. And I won't bore everybody here, but all those economic developers know that you've got to do the soil borings and the phase one environmentals and all those types of things to have a site really ready to go. So we borrowed against that CD, and by the time the year was over, we didn't really need to borrow. We had cash flow the year, so we were able to basically pay for that out of cash flow out of our money. Also, during that period in 2013, we were able to get some buildings back at the airport, which I'll show you a little more about that. And I'm going to show you quickly just our two sites, just so you know kind of the work that goes involved. If you're not involved in the economic development end, you've got to show everyone where the electrical is, where the gas is, water is, all these things. What we found out in our first study of Greenpoint that we didn't know we have two 24-inch natural gas lines running on the site. And from what I understand from others in the state, we are the only site in Mississippi that has one 24-inch gas line, and we have two. So we're pleased for that little tidbit of information. And this is our Leland site, which is great, right at the intersection of two 4-lane highways. Again, all the industrial group is there that we need. We have it's a good distribution site, we think. So we're pleased to have this, and it's also very close to rail. This is just a quick view of our airport buildings. We've got four buildings actually ranging from 25,000 feet to 200,000 feet that we're looking to market. So we've got a great asset there. The airport has an 8,000-foot runway and a 7,000-foot runway. So again, it's a great asset, but the part that we know we still got to work on is workforce, and again, I'll get into that a little bit later. But what we were able to do with this money to do the sites, we applied for a grant from MDA and received a partial grant to help pay for these site development costs, and we rolled that money into the Leland site. So we basically developed both properties for about $40,000, getting the Leland community to put a little money in and the landowner to put money in. So I think my folks that work in this industry would be pretty pleased if you could get two sites done out of $40,000. And also at that time, MEC was kind enough to fund a project competitive study, and many of you will know about that. Greenville was considered in that, and we were able to have the site consultants come visit with us. Unfortunately, the day they arrived in an ice storm. So we had to take them out to the site, and those of us who went out there, we had to dodge two 18-wheelers that were broken, that were across the road, and we were able to go out to the site, come back to our office, answer all the questions, and that was the first time we'd ever completed a project with really no questions of things you got to do later or information you got to get later. So that was one of our other moments of celebration when that group left with the ice melting, that we had really finally gotten ourselves where we thought we would be competitive with anybody. The latest thing we're working on, we're on the Mississippi River, and there are very few sites that won't flood anymore. And we've used up all of our available land, so we're fortunate that this land was given back to the levee board from the Corps of Engineers. It's 175 acres that has river access. It's sitting on the lake, but right now it'll flood. So we're in the process of doing site development work. We've done 2 of the 4 things that need to be done. We've just gotten a small grant in the last few weeks to finish the site development costs. Now the big challenge comes is to raise $15 million to build up 50 acres. But we see that as a long-term play that we as our community see great value in. And now I'm going to talk a little bit about the Work Ready program and what we're doing there. We started with one manufacturer reaching out to me probably the 3rd month that I was in office saying, "Kerry, I got a problem. I've interviewed 200 people and I only found one I could hire." And I said, "Yeah, we got to work on that." So it took us 6 months. We were able to develop a workforce training program with our community college there in Greenville, and we required everyone to take the National Career Readiness Certificate test, which is now called that. The state had that test, but they were not part of the national certification. So we've now done 12 classes with this, and we've continued to see the value of what ACT and this test does. So what we have embarked upon, and I know Hinds County is starting down this path, 7 other counties throughout the state, mostly in the Delta, are doing this. They've got a workforce certification program. And what this does is it tells you and the community what the status of your workforce is. And we quickly learned that this test, and I'll get into it in a moment, what this test does, but what we liked about this program is it brings all the different groups working together. We've got the employers involved, we've got the educators involved, leadership of the community, the workforce, Delta Workforce Investment Board. So we're really pleased of the value of this. Quickly, what this test is, it focuses on 3 things. This ACT test primarily is working on locating the information for you, reading from information, and applied mathematics. And there are 4 grade levels at how you work through this. So there's a bronze, a silver, a gold at 21%, and platinum at 1%. And this is these are national averages that I've given you here. So you get an idea of what is required to be on these different levels. I think you'll be surprised, and we were a little bit too, that Washington County is only 1% point behind the national average. And to us, what's even better about it, we've had 535 people tested. I've had 35 school kids tested. I've had no college kids tested. So every one of basically these 500 people have been unemployed people, and many of them do not have high school or college educations. So we've got people that have the talent level to be able to do these jobs. And I asked the state to give me some numbers of what these different levels would pay throughout the state, and fortunately MDA was kind enough to do this. I think you'll see that a silver level will pay living wage in many of these jobs. Again, all of these things need training, and that's what we're excited about because we see the potential of what training can be done to make this happen. But I really need to thank the Community College Board, Dr. Andrea Mayfield and her team they have now certified all our scores through the ACT database. So we've gone from being one of the few states that didn't really have any scores to now having 50,000 scores throughout the state. So you'll hear more and more about this because more and more companies are using it. I want to give you kind of briefly where we started out. When we started this program in December, we were at 13% of our goal number, and you can see there's an emerging level, a current level, a transitioning level, and an employee supporting level. The emerging level are your high school kids and college kids. The current are those who are working. The transitioning are those that are unemployed or looking for work, and then you have to get a certain number of businesses to support this initiative. So this is where we are right now with the numbers rolled over and the testing that we've done. We feel like we've got a 2-year window in which to be certified. We think we'll be certified sometime this year. We've got to finish the school kids and some of our transitioning. So we're happy with the progression there. These are our employers supporting this in Washington County. We've had great support and understanding of this program, and I hope others will consider it because I think it's really the ticket that we'll have. Just a couple other points just to let you know. The state of South Carolina has pretty much got every county certified doing what we're doing. They got 42 counties, 40 of them are certified. Their silver level ranking for the state is 55%, same level as Washington County. The state of Mississippi is 58%. But this gives us a tool as economic developers, Chad, and the rest of us to be able to show what your workforce is, what the talents are, what can be done. And I guess finally I'll end up just with a couple other points. I read a lot and I really try to study and understand this. And I've got this information on the last slide, but there are a couple things here. Part of them are funny, but part of them are real. This Flow of Money by James Fruth really kind of helps you understand what economic development does in your community. And he's got a great website, and you can really see where your region is or where your city is compared to other throughout the state. So I recommend that you take a look at that. This is not intended toward any of my public officials in Greenville, Mississippi, please understand. But there are things in here that I use because there are times when you really find people that are unhappy with you. There's chapter 8 about showing your belly, how you end up getting through some of that. But I want to thank all of you for coming today. I want to particularly thank my community for supporting me and allowing me the opportunity to learn and grow in this job. Particularly my wife, who kind of fired me and got me this job. I think she really wanted to get rid of me out of the business, and she's actually doubled the amount of vendors at her business since I left. So I guess there's some truth that maybe she needs to be the economic developer. And I know I've run over time, but I thank y'all for your attention, and I'll be glad to answer any questions later.
I'm going to talk a little bit today about leadership and preparation and funding, and we'll get into that momentarily. But I wanted to let you all know, if you didn't see the news yesterday and today, we had a nice $100 million groundbreaking ceremony in Hattiesburg yesterday. I tell you, we've been blessed immensely in my 6.5 years in Hattiesburg. We've had a lot of days with $100 million announcements, and that is really a rarity. I mean, it's like finding a needle in a haystack, as you know, trying to recruit companies to your community. The announcement yesterday was in partnership with Mississippi Power. Johnny Atherton and Brian Usforge are here today. Guys, thanks for the partnership and relationship in Hattiesburg. Silicon Ranch made the $100 million announcement. They are putting in a 450-acre solar farm in the city of Hattiesburg in Forest County. It's going to be a 50-megawatt solar farm, which is pretty amazing. Can you imagine 450 acres of solar panels? We are pumped about it. There's another project that is on the solar farm side of the equation that we'll be having a groundbreaking ceremony for probably in the next month or so. And when all of this transpires in Greater Hattiesburg, we are literally going to be a solar hub of the Deep South, without a shadow of a doubt. North Carolina has an inordinate amount of solar. Georgia has some solar. But when you look at Mississippi, Alabama, Louisiana, Hattiesburg, Mississippi is going to be the solar hub of the Deep South. So what does that mean? First of all, it's great in and of itself, having renewable energy on the grid and having these major capital investments. By the way, this project is going to create 400 construction jobs, so it's really going to stimulate the local construction market. But above and beyond that, it helps companies perceive us differently. We're going to be kind of in an elite category, high-tech category. There are a lot of companies, a lot of corporations that want to locate in areas that have green energy on the grid. So I look forward in the years to come to see how that pays dividends for our community. Now back to preparing your community for economic development success. I'm going to start at a macro level, and then we're going to work our way quickly down to a micro level. First, you have to have an organization that everybody believes in. So for you economic development professionals out there, if your community doesn't believe in what you're doing, you know that it makes your job more difficult. Fortunately, I've got a great private and public sector pulling in the same direction. So as I often like to say, you got to have folks that drink the Kool-Aid. They've got to believe in what you're doing. So that's of paramount importance. As John Maxwell says, everything rises and falls on leadership. So I encourage you to be a servanthood leader, to recruit servanthood leaders on your board of directors. We have a 30-person board of directors at the Area Development Partnership. We cover Forest, Lamar, Perry counties, 150,000 population area. We have great relationships with our public sector, but we are driven by the private sector. I encourage you to get your private sector on board with you. Have great relationships with your mayor and your council and your supervisors, but do not neglect the private sector who's out there creating jobs and making it happen on a daily basis. They can help you tremendously. Within our organization, while we have a large board of directors, we have a small executive committee. We are fairly small compared to the 30-person board of directors. We have a 9-person executive committee, and it's really comprised of CEOs in Greater Hattiesburg. I view my executive committee as an advisory committee. They're consultants. They help guide. They help guide me. They're there when I have questions. I can bounce things off of them. So I encourage you to have a close-knit group of advisors within your organization. Also, certainly it's important to have a diverse board. Diversity is crucial. But at the end of the day, have as many CEOs as you can on your board. CEOs just typically get it. They're CEOs for a reason. They are running their respective businesses, and they can think at a high level and provide good strategy, and they can also do something else. They can provide money. They have access to the purse strings. So again, it's not rocket science, but I encourage you to get your CEOs involved. If you have a lot of CEOs on the sidelines in your community, that's a red flag. You're in trouble. You need to get your CEOs in the fold with you. The ADP is a private, nonprofit organization, so I really commend our community leaders in 1992 for forming the organization. So we are in our 24th year. It's a private nonprofit with 850 members ranging from mom and pop shops to multinational corporations. So we're the regional chamber of commerce and economic development agency. So if you think about it, 24 years ago, our community leaders had the vision to combine the chamber of commerce and the economic development effort and put it under one umbrella. That was fast forward 25 years later to 2016, that was a wise move. Hattiesburg's economy is on fire. It's not happenstance. It was good planning, good commitment, and good execution. So I encourage you also to think regionally. We serve Forest, Lamar, and Perry counties. It's not always easy holding a regional alliance together, but it sure pays dividends for our state and for South Mississippi in our case. We are also the one-stop shop. I hope your elected officials have confidence in what you're doing, because our elected officials have total confidence that we can handle the economic development side of the equation. So what they do is they outsource their economic development efforts to us. When a site selection consultant calls, when MDA calls, when a corporate leader calls, we are the one-stop shop. They don't have to go to City Hall and the supervisors, and they don't go to 3 counties and 5 different economic development agencies. They come to us. And so I encourage you to consolidate as much as you can. Certainly, I know some communities have multiple chambers, multiple economic development agencies, and I hope that works well for your area. But even if you are not under one umbrella, please partner with the guy next door or the gal next door so that you know what's going on and you can work cohesively as a unit. Quickly, on the funding side, you have to have a well-funded organization in order to achieve economic development success. Now, well-funded is going to be different for every community. In a community of 5,000 people, well-funded is going to be at a smaller level. In our case, our organization has a $1.8 million budget for our Chamber of Commerce and Economic Development effort. 65% of those funds come from the private sector, 35% from the public sector. Think about that. It's driven by the private sector. The public sector plays a big role, and they step up and they participate, and in fact, they just increased their contributions to our organization. But the private sector provides 65% of the 1.8 million. So why is the funding important? Because you can have the right staff, you can retain the staff, you have the resources. If you need to be on a plane and go to Chicago or New York or California or wherever you need to be, you can do it. In our organization, we can be anywhere, anytime, because we've got the resources to do that. So I encourage you, for those private sector leaders and public sector leaders in the audience, it's really a challenge that I'm giving you. Fund your economic development agency at a level where they don't have one arm tied behind their back. If you don't fund them, they're just going to limp along. It's just a fact. So I encourage you to be proactive. Our three major public sector agencies that fund us are the City of Hattiesburg, Forest, and Lamar counties, and they do a great job in supporting us. And really, we don't get any economic development deals across the finish line without them. So it doesn't really matter how well we're funded if you don't have those relationships with the public sector. So make sure you're building the relationships that you need to.
Tell us, in your opinion, what are the keys to economic development at the local level?
Well, at the local level, you have to have a well-funded economic development organization. You also have to have the public and private sectors pulling in the same direction, and that cohesiveness and teamwork really leads to our ability to achieve great economic development results.